Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second day of the 2022 Policy Institutes. Before we get started, we are excited to offer today's webinar in both English and Spanish. I want to say thank you to the team at Language Service Solutions for being here today and providing this service. And I'm going to turn it over to Murtado now to share with you how to make sure the Spanish interpretation is on.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be giving this announcement both in English and Spanish. Muchísimas gracias. Voy a hacer este anuncio en español y inglés.
I will be making this announcement in both English and Spanish.
Thank the organizers of this event for their commitment to language justice and to creating these multilingual spaces. Antes que nada, queremos agradecerles a los organizadores de este evento por su compromiso con la justicia del lenguaje y con el crear estos espacios multilingües. So, good morning, everyone. Angelina and myself will be providing interpretation into Spanish and English. So the way we would like to do this and how we can help create these spaces is by connecting at the bottom of the screen. You will see a little globe. We would like you to go to that globe. If you're not bilingual in English and in Spanish, click on it and select English. That's all you have to do in order to participate and to understand everything that is being said in Spanish. Muy buenos días, Angelina y yo estaremos interpretando este evento del español al inglés y del inglés al español. Por lo tanto, queremos que vayan a la parte inferior de la pantalla, hagan clic en el globito y seleccionen español para participar en español, ya que muchas de las presentaciones van a ser en inglés. If you're not connecting with a computer, but you're connecting with a cell phone or a tablet, please go to where it says More. You'll see the 3 dots. Click on them and select Language Interpretation and then Spanish. Then select Done. Si ustedes están conectándose desde una tableta o desde un teléfono inteligente, vayan a la parte inferior de la pantalla y seleccionen interpretación de lenguaje, español, y luego pongan terminado para activar esta función. The second thing that we would like to ask is to please mute your device if you're not directly participating, and that goes for everyone, including the panelists. If you're not presenting or speaking, please mute your device to keep better audio. La otra cosa que les pedimos es que si no están participando, que se aseguren de tener en silencio su dispositivo para mejorar la calidad del audio. I think that's all from me, so I'm going to send it back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Murtado. Also, thank you, Angie. And we appreciate the whole team at Language Service Solutions for being here as part of these institutes. And we've enjoyed working with you all and collaborating with you throughout the institutes, and really appreciate you making these events more inclusive. So if anyone is just now joining us, you will need to go down to the right corner of your screen where there's a circle that says English or Spanish, and you'll need to select your language that you want to hear the presentations in throughout the day. So everyone will need to do that. And a note for our presenters today, please speak slowly and allow some pauses, and because this will help our interpreters greatly. So for closed captioning, click on the CC icon at the bottom of your screen and choose Show Subtitle. To turn this back off, you click CC again and then Hide Subtitle. If you missed the first institute last week on October 19th, you can still review the recording. We had some fantastic speakers last week. I will be sending you the link to the recording for last week's institute as well as this week's in the follow-up email that you'll receive after the institute today. We're so glad that you all are here with us for the next 3 hours, and we are going to be joined by yet another fantastic group of speakers and experts who will share with us how they have used storytelling to achieve change and make an impact. Your MCs for today are me. I am Malia Rose Waters. I am the Policy Director at Prevent Child Abuse North Carolina, and I'm joined by Stacy Morgan from the Mental Health Transformation Alliance and the North Carolina Collaborative for Children, Youth, and Families. The 2022 Policy Institutes will focus on storytelling to achieve change and make an impact. Stories are lived experiences that we recall in order to share what has happened to us. They enable us to connect across differences and embrace our empathy and humanity for each other. Our stories can unite us toward a common goal and inspire us to seek justice. The speakers across the 2 policy institutes this year will be sharing a variety of storytelling tools and techniques, and many of them have their own personal stories they would like to share with you all. So I have a few housekeeping items that I want to go over before we hear from our first presenter. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or use the Q&A function. We will try to answer some of your questions live, as many of them as we can. If we're unable to answer your questions, we encourage you to reach directly out to the presenters and ask them your questions and follow up. Prevent Child Abuse North Carolina's communications team will be live tweeting this event. So make sure you check that out at PCANC on Twitter and use the hashtag NC Policy Institutes 2022. Thank you to our sponsors. Our advocate level sponsors include Youth of North Carolina, WellCare, Sandhill Center, United Healthcare, and Partners Behavioral Health Management. Supporter level sponsors include Via Health and Town Bank. And we appreciate the support from the Essentials for Childhood North Carolina team. Without your commitment to improving outcomes for children, youth, and families, these events would not be possible. So thank you so much for your support. We also want to thank the Planning Cabinet for these events. There are members representing the North Carolina Collaborative for Children, Youth, and Families NC Child, Prevent Child Abuse North Carolina, Eye to Eye Center for Integrative Health, North Carolina Institute of Medicine, and Mental Health Transformation Alliance. Now let's meet our speakers for today. Our welcome message is from an incredible youth advocate, public speaker, and the founder of Hear Our Voices, Elijah Lee. If you joined us last week, you were able to hear Elijah's presentation. He is so incredible. We wanted to give everyone an opportunity to hear his presentation, which is why we're sharing it again today. Next, we will be joined by Felicia Burnett, who is a national director with Moms Rising. Then our keynote speaker and America's leading expert on turning transitions into success, Dr. Tommy Watson will be joining us. After we hear from Dr. Watson, we will have a brief break, so you'll have an opportunity to get up and stretch your legs or check your emails. After our break, we will hear from Rose Hoban, who's the founder and editor of NC Health News. And she is going to facilitate a conversation with Amy Dickey, who is a family partner, and Jessica Aguilar, who is a parent advocate. So let's go ahead and get started with a very important message from Elijah Lee.
Hi, my name is Elijah Lee, and I am so excited and honored to have an opportunity to speak to you all today about storytelling, as well as a little bit about my story and how I got to where I am. Like I said, my name is Elijah, and I'm a 14-year-old community activist. I currently live in Chesterfield, Virginia, but I'm originally from Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina. So while I am coming to you virtually and via video, shout out to all my Halifax County people in the room. Now, I also want to start off just by saying thank you to each and every one of you here. Your presence here boldly states that you're prepared to really get involved with advocacy. And I'd be remiss if I didn't send a special thank you to Prevent Child Abuse North Carolina. I remain extremely grateful for all the work you all do every single day to better our communities. And without further ado, let's hop right into it. Okay. So as I said, I want to talk a little bit about telling your story, and I want to kind of use my story to help guide me a little bit. And so let's get right into it. So first, I want to recognize the power in storytelling. And I have this first because we cannot talk about storytelling and we cannot talk about the importance of it without recognizing the power in it. I want to start off by saying that your story matters, and it is crucial that you share it. Now, I know that I am speaking to many of you, and however, I want this to be an individualized message, and I hope that each and every one of you understand that your story matters, and there is so much power and impact that your story has. And this is why it's so important to share it. And this is why we're having institutes like this, is so we can allow everyone to understand your story and how you got to where you are today. We know that storytelling can be used in so many ways, from empowering other people to tell their story to even creating a space where we can all be vulnerable. We know that storytelling is similar to dominoes, and that by you taking the risk, taking the leap of faith to share yours, other people may be inspired to share theirs as well. And this is how we create communities of safe spaces and environments where it's okay to be vulnerable, and that's how we get growth. We know that storytelling can also be used to learn more about who we are, as well as move forward in specific realms of advocacy. Our storytelling can be used to help other people understand what it's like to experience certain things. And our storytelling can also be used to allow other people to resonate with who we are and have that level of empathy. We finally, with our stories, we have the ability to make long-lasting change. We can use our stories to create foundations to our communities. We can use our stories to build strong environments and create avenues of success for everyone in our communities. Our stories can be the very thing that helps save and impact and change lives. And I think that's something that's really cool, just about you taking the time to share your story. Stories have started as a way for people to relate and learn from each other for centuries and millenniums, and we are merely continuing the task. And so lastly, your story has the ability to change the standpoint in any situation. Your input and your advice, how you got to where you are, that has the ability to make profound effects on our world. And so it's more important than ever that you take time to share that with everyone. So now that we understand the power in storytelling and the really why it's important, let's get into storytelling itself. And so we start from the beginning. Our story is not always, well, our story's beginning is not always the first step of action. It's not always the first march or the first social media post, the first blog post, the first article we read. Our beginning could oftentimes be maybe our first exposure to an issue, our new education concerning an issue, maybe a personal experience, and you recognizing that and reconciling with that. Maybe starting from the beginning means a new level of self-awareness that you've received, or even sometimes having that level of empathy. Collaboration with others can be the reason you start. Now, identifying this point in our lives, while hard, it is necessary. I say this because every story has the beginning, and every story has roots. And these roots are the foundation of every story. So just as you're building any house, you start with the foundation. You start with understanding, how is this house going to stand up? And this is where it stands up. And so it's going to be hard sometimes, right? Because oftentimes our first exposure to an issue means that someone is experiencing a level of pain. Maybe our personal experiences mean that we have to recognize a pain that we ourselves have felt. And even when we look at things like collaboration with others and our empathy, we recognize that even for this to begin to be the beginning of our story, we have to then understand that someone that we know and love has experienced a level of pain. And so while this is hard, while it's going to always be hard, we know that this is the thing that catapults us into the future. And so I want to talk a little bit about my beginning. My story starts with the first grade, and I first learned that a friend of mine was being abused. This was considered my first exposure to child abuse, and it put a burden on my heart to understand that this was the reality for someone that I cared so deeply about. It was the reality for someone that I called friend. And so I had to go home and have some tough conversations with my mom, and we really learned and talked about child abuse and neglect, what that meant, the impact that it had. And from there, I felt an urgency to do something. I felt an urgency to get involved. I couldn't sit silent any longer. I had to do something. And so then that's when I really started to educate myself and really started to begin the action period of my story. And so before we get into acting itself and really changing everything, we have to ask, where does our action come from? So after we process the beginning of our story, we then have to redirect the conversation. Where did you understand there was something you could do? And where did you get your ideas for involvement are two of the main questions that I tend to ask myself when I'm looking at this kind of period of my story. For me, I found a lot of passion and a lot of motivation in things like history. If you can't tell already, I'm a massive nerd. And so I remember reading my mom's old encyclopedias, and I remember going on my mom's Google on her phone, and I would just look up all these historical events. And I just remember learning and learning and learning and growing. And these were the things that soon and later motivated me to get involved. However, yours can be from a local resource. Maybe you were inspired by things from social media to really get involved. And so finding what motivates you, that allows you to better understand where you want to go in your field. We know that identifying our inspiration for action also allows our listener to better understand where we come from. It allows those listening to our story to understand, how do we get here and what can they do to help? And so this is also how we segue what we need from others. So like I said, I personally was motivated by history. I was able to learn about the civil rights movement, and I learned from people like Congressman John Lewis and the Children Who Say the power and importance of young people being involved in this movement. I learned from them that our young people have a seat at the table, so it's beyond important that we begin to take it. I learned sacrifice from people like Emily Davison and Emmeline Pankhurst. These people taught me that while these times are challenging, it is necessary that we sometimes give a sacrifice in hopes of bettering our communities. And I learned the power of using my voice from people like Fred Hampton and Assata Shakur. Now, the power in using your voice, I ask that if you don't remember anything else, may you always understand that. may you understand that the words that you say have the power to change the course of history. And you may feel like I'm being dramatic and blowing this out of proportion. However, I promise you I'm not. And so find someone that can teach you about the power in using words. Find someone that can teach you and maybe even begin to understand that the words you say have the ability to change the course of everything in America. And so we have to be able to use that voice for the change that we need. So what now is what we're asking ourselves, is that now that we have identified our story in the beginning of that story, while we have identified the roots, we also have to now look to our action, right? And we look to our motivation for that action. So there are numerous ways to act on issues. We can lead and host community events, things such as marches, maybe resource fairs. We also offer these types of resources, right? There's numerous ways to do that. And the age of technology, we have things like email. And so you can simply send something out that has a list of resources, hotlines, contacts. Something that I really want to emphasize on using are things like social media. Our young people are necessary when we're looking at things like fighting child abuse and neglect. Our young people are absolutely necessary. We're really considering changing any American issue. And one way to get in contact with our young people and connect with our young people is through the use of social media. And so you can use social media to post about certain instances, post about certain resources, post about certain events, and to really make sure that our young people are there, present, and getting involved. We know you can also get involved in legislation. Talk to your legislators, talk to those representing you to make sure they're putting in legislation that represents what you need and what our communities really need, especially when it comes down to things like child abuse and neglect. Another thing is things like raising money through philanthropic efforts, and using this money to better our communities financially is another big one. And then lastly, spread the word about issues. And so I give you these things to not serve as a checkbox that you can check away and to kind of say that you've done this and I've talked to my legislator and I use social media and I have offer resources. But you are able to use lists just like these to find what fits you. Everyone is different. Everyone acts different. Everyone has a different level of motivation. Everyone finds something different. And so I ask that you go through this list to find what works best for you, and that is your action. Just to now tell you a little bit more about my story, it really begins with the life of activism, right? And I love this quote, "Be the change you wish to see in our world." And this really started because I remember feeling so heartbroken and so down about our world. And I really understood that while yes, I still sometimes feel sad about the things that go on in the world, I also have the ability to change it. So I'm going to give it all I can while I can. And so this kind of goes back to our previous slide in that I was trying to learn about different things that I could do. I was trying to learn about different ways that I could make change and different ways that I could be the change. And analyzing the thing that I was motivated by, which was history, I remember learning about these phenomenal marches where our communities rallied together for a single cause. However, something I do remember is that all the books I read did not tell me at all how hard it was to sometimes lead a march, right? And how hard it was to sometimes organize a community. And so through organizing a march, I wanted to get permits. I wanted to make sure I was doing everything the right way. I wanted to have speakers. However, the most important part to me was community partnerships. I wanted these to not only be times where we recognize child abuse, we reconcile with the fact of that, and we really begin to act on it, but I wanted to make sure that my community was coming together, not over me, not over some 10-year-old holding a sign and a megaphone, which I don't know who gave me a megaphone as a 10-year-old. But I wanted to make sure our community was coming together over our young people. I wanted to allow them the opportunity to really lift them up. And so that's what a lot of my marches were about, getting youth involved. So from those marches, I got a little bit of recognition. Now, as you can see, this slide is not titled recognition. It's titled spreading the word, because the Marva's Hair Project, Kelly Clarkson, People's Magazine, all of it, it was never about me. It was never about Elijah Lee. It was never about the fact that he led a march. Spreading the word and this recognition to me meant that we were showing other young people that it is possible. As I said, I come from a low-income community. I'm obviously a person of color. I'm a young man of color. And so we know the stereotypes that are against those types of things already. However, most importantly, I'm a young person. There are stereotypes that said I should just sit down and be quiet. I said, stay out of grown folks' business. I shouldn't be talking about this stuff. This is too hard for me. I should just stick outside and just relax and mind my business and just have a nice childish life, right? However, that wasn't the case anymore. And I needed to let other young people understand that in our world, yes, there's hardships, but we also have the ability to change that. We have the ability to rise to the occasion and be the change we wish to see. And that's what spreading the word meant to me. So hopefully those instances brought a little relief to other young people. So after the marches, it brought me to something else. And this was a new line of advocacy for me. And that was the pediatric safe rooms. And this is when we took uninviting hospital rooms and we converted them into child-friendly spaces. And I really started this after I found out that after being found in abusive situations, our young people then go straight to the hospital just for checkups and things of that nature. However, I also grew up in a household where my two older brothers played a lot of football growing up. And so I was very familiar with what hospital rooms looked like, unfortunately. And I remember even in that space, it was sometimes uncomfortable and I just didn't want to be there sometimes. And so I couldn't imagine what it was like for other young people who were being found in these situations. And so I started at Vidant North Hospital in North Carolina, which is my local hospital, and we raised $3,000 to renovate these rooms. And then upon our move to Virginia, I wanted to do something similar. However, this is going to be on a much larger scale because we weren't just renovating a room, but we were building an entirely new room, building it from the ground up, making sure that it is a trauma-informed care space. And so with that being said, I am so proud of my community just to say that we have raised over $12,500 to make sure that we are fulfilling these properties and making sure that we're having trauma-informed care spaces available to every single young person, which I think is so powerful. So from the pediatric safe rooms, I still wanted to do more. I had this passion, this burning love for just helping and working with my community. And so with that in mind, I, with the help of some phenomenal people, started Hear Our Voices Incorporated. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to the empowerment of young people through offering resources, whether that's connections, partnerships, finances, whatever they need, in an effort to simply empower the youth voice. Now, there are a couple of things I love about Hear Our Voices, but the most important thing that I love is that our board, is that we have a board full of law enforcement officers, of teachers, of anyone that you could possibly imagine. And this has allowed for me to personally grow. These people have brought ideas that I would never, ever think of to the table. And I've been working in this for the past 5 years. However, these ideas have allowed us as an organization to grow and to help more young people. And so what that means, so with that being said, I asked, what does it mean to grow, right? So we live in this ever-changing world. We live in a world that is constantly moving and constantly fluid. And so sometimes we have to adapt, and we have to adapt to use our story. So adapting means we grow and we change so that we can continue to have the impact we need to make the change and to be the change we wish to see. So adapting means that we're keeping an open mind. We're continuing education because we know that there's always more to learn about an issue. We're trying numerous ways of advocacy. If one way doesn't work perfectly, then we try another one. We're reaching out to different people and we're moving into different rooms because it is important that we're cementing those connections and we're getting those connections and getting that new voice in the room. But most importantly, we're never letting fear stop us. In this realm, it's easy to get intimidated. It's easy to feel along. It's easy to feel like that our voices don't matter. But I promise you, they do. I promise that you have the power to change the world. You have the power to change the course of our history. And so it's really important that we're not letting fear get in our way. So with that being said, and understanding that sometimes fear does get our way, we also have to look at things like resilience and understanding obstacles. When I was 3 years old, my father unfortunately passed away. And this was difficult for my entire family. And even growing up, it still is difficult. However, through all of this, I learned that we are resilient. I didn't label this slide my hardships or my obstacles or something that I had to overcome. I labeled this slide resilience to serve as a reminder that while we're going to experience hardships in our advocacy, we're going to experience times where it's really difficult. We may experience traumatic events. We may have past traumatic events. We as humans are resilient. We have the ability to overcome anything that is in our way. And that is something that is absolutely beautiful. So to kind of wrap all this up, I say that our stories are always important. Our stories always need to be shared. It is sometimes up to us to be the ones to share them. Our stories are ever growing and ever changing, and there is no end. And so I don't call our stories books because to me books end, but instead I call them chapters because chapters, while they sometimes have a closing, there's always another one to follow. And so our lives are a series of chapters and our stories as the book they're in. And so we look at things like find your beginning, find what motivates you, and what form of action works best for who you are. These are the three things that usually comprise of my story, so maybe that comprise of yours as well. Be selective in partnerships in your time. Your time is worth it, and you matter as a whole, so make sure we're watching that as well. We must continue to learn and adapt. Our worlds are ever changing, our lives are ever changing. And so we have to be able to move with the flow to find what works best for our community. And finally, we must always stick together. We can't do this by ourselves. We can't do this alone. We have to be able to move through this as a collective. Finally, when one falls, we all fall. But when one rises, we all rise. I remain so grateful for this opportunity to speak to each and every one of you here today, and just simply the opportunity to share a little bit more about my story. And hopefully, as you all go back to the community, you will take time to share your story with others and truly rise so we can all rise again. Thank you so much. Hi, my name is Elijah Lee, and I am so excited and
Thank you so much, Elijah. He is incredible, Elijah, and I'm always so inspired to hear him speak. He shared his social media and email at the end of that presentation if you would like to reach out to him directly. He is open and welcomes communication. I also want to mention for anyone who may have joined us a few minutes late, that you will need to go and click on the bottom right corner of your Zoom screen. You will see an English or Spanish button, and you will need to click on English if you would like to hear the institutes in English or Spanish. So please make sure you have chosen which language you want to hear. Next, I am thrilled to introduce to you all a colleague of mine that I've known for several years now, Felicia Burnett, who is a national director with Moms Rising. Felicia.
Good morning, everyone. Like Malia said, we've worked together for a very long time. It's good to see you again, Malia. My name is Felicia Burnett, and I'm the National Director for Healthcare at Moms Rising. I am just really excited to be here with you today to talk about storytelling and how we can use the power of our personal stories to shift narratives, create culture change, and win on public policy proposals. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, so sharing our stories is an effective tactic for getting a message across. And I think it's a bit intuitive that stories are more memorable than sharing facts and figures. Stories paint a picture that data and numbers alone can't show. In fact, they actually activate a different part of our brain. They also create a sense of connection, of empathy, and they build familiarity and trust between the story sharer and those who hear the story. Simply put, stories work because people react to the lived experiences of other people. And sharing stories with lawmakers helps them understand how the policy and budget decisions they make impact families across the state and across the nation. So in the time that we have together today, I'm going to talk about why personal stories are important for social change and who should share their story, how Moms Rising uses storytelling in the work that we do, how helping to gather stories and helping others in your community share stories will build our collective power, and finally, what elements make up a good story. But first, to get started, I wanted to share a story of my own, my family's story. So this is my son, Ethan. And when he was born in 2006, I was beyond excited and pretty nervous about becoming a mom. And his dad was a law student at the time, and I was a manager at a retail store when we learned that he needed to start chemotherapy at just 6 weeks old. As you can imagine, this news was devastating. So I had to quit working to take care of him. And at that time, we lost our family's health insurance. And I actually became uninsured myself. So we were incredibly fortunate that Ethan was able to qualify for North Carolina Medicaid, which literally saved his life. And he is now a happy, healthy 16-year-old. But I wasn't able to get health insurance again until the Affordable Care Act was passed or enacted, because I have what companies have decided to call, insurance companies have decided to call pre-existing conditions. So this meant going several years without really being able to afford to go to see a doctor or to afford any medications that were prescribed if I did actually get in to see a doctor. So when I came across Moms Rising back in 2007, I was super excited when I saw that they were advocating for healthcare for everyone, because not many people were doing that at the time. Because Moms Rising knows that when parents are healthy, it helps improve the health of their children and actually the health of our communities. So I shared my story with Moms Rising in 2009 during the lead up to the Affordable Care Act. And I've been advocating for healthcare with Moms Rising ever since, which has led me to not only get to have some incredible experiences, it's led me all the way to the Oval Office to share my experience with the president himself, but to also work each and every day to lift up the voices and stories of parents in the health policy process. This act of storytelling was a critical piece of the healthcare repeal fight during 2017. Thousands, maybe even millions of people spoke out and shared their stories. And it ultimately created enough pressure to stop the repeal of the Affordable Care Act, which would have brought back the terrible practice of denying people with pre-existing conditions like me, and so many in the photos here, their health coverage. So I share this story with you today to show you first that I'm not asking anyone to do anything that I myself haven't done or am not willing to do, because I know firsthand how vulnerable sharing your story can feel. And second, to demonstrate how personal stories are not only important for social change, but also for policy change. It's sometimes simple for lawmakers to look at numbers and balance sheets and not really realize that the decisions that they make can quite literally have life and death consequences. So your story matters. Our stories matter. Stories can change the direction and destiny of public policy. Stories are significantly more memorable than facts and figures. And it's important to remember that storytellers are experts in their own experience. And when others hear experiences that sound like their own, it makes them feel less alone. So public policies fall short when they don't reflect the stories of real people, especially families who are most impacted, who are often people of color, immigrants, disabled people, and LGBTQ people. And when new laws or regulatory rules are being proposed, hearing from those who will be most impacted can greatly influence those who are tasked with making the final decisions. So I'm going to read a list, and I want you to listen and see if you identify with any of these statements. And as I go, feel free to use an emoji on your Zoom or make a comment in the chat just to show that which topics are resonating with you. So when healthcare policy is being decided, we need to be hearing from people with chronic diseases or who are medically fragile or disabled to better understand how to meet their needs and improve their quality of life. When police and public safety decisions are being made, we need to hear from people living in communities who are more strongly policed to better understand how this impacts their daily lives and whether they do in fact feel more safe, or if current policies are actually having the opposite impact. When childcare policy is being decided, we need to be hearing from both parents and providers alike to better understand how to support a critical system that allows our nation's families and economy to thrive. When immigration policy is being decided, we need to hear the voices and stories of those who were not born in this country, but who call it home just the same. When gun safety policies are being decided, we need to hear the voices of those who have been impacted by gun violence in their community or who have lost a loved one to suicide. When workplace policies are being decided, we need to hear the voices of those who are workers and how those decisions fit in with their lives outside of work, their families, and our community as a whole. When budget policies are being decided, we need to hear the experiences of families, communities, and businesses to understand where investments must be made to support all of us and leave no one behind. And finally, when voting rights are being decided, we need to hear from those who have been disenfranchised or who have experienced issues exercising their right to vote. I see a lot of agreement in the chat. That's great. So these are all policy areas that Moms Rising works on. And the voices of our members and folks in the community play an integral role in helping to move the needle forward on each and every one of them. So when it comes to changing the landscape of public policy, we all eventually do have a story to share. And there are a lot of ways that you can do it. At Moms Rising, sharing stories is an integral part of literally every step of our advocacy process. And it's a key part of how we push movements forward. So we share stories in email outreaches. They go out to all of our membership, and this helps us to inspire action as well as spurs people to share their own stories with us. We also highlight the stories and experiences of our members on our blog in many different forms. We share stories on social media, including on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And we do this in a number of ways, from just sharing quotes to creating graphics and even sometimes videos. We create issue storybooks. This is one thing that we're really known for, actually. And we'll include dozens, sometimes even hundreds of stories compiled into one place on a specific topic. And then we deliver those to state lawmakers, members of Congress, the president, really anybody who's making a decision on the topic at hand. And we also put our storytellers in contact with members of the media during peak moments for a specific issue. That's important. You can't just pitch a story to media that's not like currently in the news cycle. So you have to pay attention to when it's the most strategic time to put storytellers in touch with media. And then often our members even get to speak at events on Capitol Hill or in the state legislature. This picture is of one of our healthcare volunteers speaking in the Capitol building during the 2017 healthcare repeal fight. And then finally, lately, we've been putting more of an emphasis on gathering stories on video. We've been using pretty cool tool called Soapbox, and it makes it just really simple for someone to record a video story easily and then share it across multiple platforms, either using their computer or their phone. So gathering stories and helping others share their stories is really important because stories are at the heart of a people-powered movement. It's also a continuous process because people are having new experiences each and every single day. And, and also the policies shift over time. So having stories that are recent and available and storytellers who are ready to share their stories helps to build our collective power so that when opportunities to influence public policies arise or to shift narratives around any given issue that we're ready. We've learned that the best way to gather stories is to start first by sharing a story. You'll notice I shared my story at the first. So when I'm talking with people, even if it's just one-on-one, I start by sharing pieces of my story with them before I ever ask them to share anything about themselves. This helps to open up a dialogue and it builds trust that otherwise wouldn't be possible because of our shared understanding. And an important reminder is that a lot of the stories that people share or that at organizations or volunteers that we decide to lift up are very personal and sometimes very traumatizing. So when talking with storytellers, you should make sure to ask open-ended questions if you think you need more information rather than specific ones. So for example, you could say, can you tell me a little more about that? Or what happened next? Hope that makes sense. All right, so in our last minute here together, I just want to talk about the elements of a good story. Number one is the hero. So who is the person experiencing the story? Is it you? Is it your child? Is it someone in your community? What intersecting identities are a critical part of who you are? There's the content, like the where and when of the story, what places, people, and experiences have shaped the story, the challenges that were faced, what barriers or obstacles were faced, the outcome, what happened as a result of the challenges or how things changed because of the challenges. And then finally, most importantly, is the call to action. It's important not to just share a story, but to say what you want to see happen, who else is experiencing similar things, and what needs to change. I do have a Mad Lib that I'm going to send around via email after that has all of these ingredients to sharing a good story. So look for that in your inboxes after today's event. And I'm going to turn it back over to Malia.
Thank you so much, Felicia. This is really helpful. And I encourage you all to go to momsrising.org to learn more about their work. And also, maybe you would like to share your story with them. They're working on a lot of different issues. And or reach out directly to Felicia if you'd like to learn more about their work. And I think the Mad Lib is great, and I can't wait to share it with you all. I think that's a fun tool to take a look at. So thank you, Felicia. I really appreciate you being here today. I am going to turn it over now to our keynote speaker, Dr. Tommy Watson. So excited to have you here with us today and for you to share your story with us. I will turn it over to you.
Good morning, Malia. How are you? Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Thank you.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. I hope you all are doing well on this rainy, what is it, Wednesday here in Charlotte. I'm sure it's raining on other parts of the state as well. So it's a blessing, honor to be here with you guys today. Kudos to Felicia and Elijah for sharing their amazing stories and putting their stories in action to bring about change. That's what we want to do. And today I'm going to just, spend a little time talking about the importance of storytelling and how it can impact social and political change, because that is a very, very critical aspect of what we're here to do and shooting to do today. I want to start off by giving you a couple of thank yous to Malia and her team. The planning team has done an awesome job. I was so excited when they reached out to me about this opportunity, as I have been doing work with stories, telling my own story for over 30 years. And then my master's was centered around stories and also my doctorate as well. So it was a title that was very, very intriguing and exciting to me when it was brought to my attention. So kudos to all of you who are going to be utilizing stories to impact change in our communities. We need them. Just in case you're wondering where I get started, I am from Denver, Colorado, and I am a Denver Broncos fan. So that is a story that is going to stick with me forever during our wins and losses. And we're losing big time right now. So that's a whole nother story. We'll talk about this some other time. All right. But nevertheless, I'm a Broncos fan. So I want to show you guys a video. And this video right here is going to kind of lay out for us the difference between sharing stats versus sharing stories. We'll come back in just a moment and talk about this when we're finished.
How do I know? A lot of people, when they think of the phrase, how do I know, they always want to put the what behind it. How do I know what I'm supposed to do? The question that you really should ask is, how do I know why I'm here? Because when you know your why, your what becomes more clear and more impactful. If you know, like for instance, people know that I do comedy, but that's what I do. My why is to inspire people to walk in purpose. So I can do comedy, I can write books, I can be in a movie, because all of it is motivated by my why. In fact, I have a new web series out called Michael Jr. Break Time. We probably just did the 6th episode. It's on YouTube. So every single Wednesday at 3 o'clock, we drop a new episode on YouTube of Michael Jr. Break Time. What it is it's me. I travel around the country and I do stand-up comedy, in case you didn't know. And in the middle of my comedy set sometime, I'll stop and just talk to my audience. And we've been filming this, and it's pretty cool. So we're in Winston-Salem. I'm gonna show you a clip from Winston-Salem. And I'm just talking to this guy in the audience, and he tells me that he's a musical instructor at a school. So I was like, all right, you're a musical instructor, can you sing? Let me hear you sing a song. So this is what happened at the last episode of Michael Jr.'s Break Time. Check it. So you're a musical director? Cool.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let me get a couple bars of like Amazing Grace. Can you do the first part of that? Go ahead.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Wow. That bro could sing, you know what I'm saying? All right. Now, what you give me the version is if your uncle just got out of jail, you got shot in the back when you was a kid. I'm just saying, let me see the hood version real quick, if you know which version I'm talking about. Just see if that exists. Let me see what you got.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I see.
All right, we can all go home now. We can all click off here and go home. That is the difference between sharing stats, which usually is the what we're doing, and stories, which is usually the why. See, the why is what gets people to move and to take action. We want to move away from the what and move to the why, or support the what with the why of the story. So that is a great example of how we move away from things that may just touch the head, but not necessarily touch the heart, but moving to the place where to the things that touch both. So quickly, during our time together, I want to share with you what I'm going to be talking about here. We're going to share a little bit about the stories and how stories impact change, how the stories have to impact our head and our hearts. And I'm going to share with you a little bit about my own story and some of the childhood challenges I faced around neglect, and then how we can use our stories to impact social change and policy as well. And then I have a surprise for you at the end. So stick around and get ready for that surprise there. You can also put any questions that you have in the chat box, as it will be monitored, and I'll be answering those at the end, or you can wait at the end and share those as well. So just kind of give an overview of where we're headed. Would love for us to stay friends and stay connected as well. You'll have many times throughout my presentations just simply scan the QR box to make sure we're staying connected. But love to follow you and just send me a shout out there as well. So part of what we're facing in our industry right now is we're having a lot of young people who are losing their innocence. Many of them are faced with childhood depression because of some of the challenges they're facing around abuse and neglect, causing lots of trouble in school, causing trouble socially. And it's really heartbreaking to see a lot of our young people doing that. But I don't want us to stay at that particular place. I want us to be able to imagine a place where we're moving our kids to a place of where they're experiencing joy. They're experiencing peace. They're excited about life, and they feel protected, because each and every one of our kids need that. But most importantly, they're beating the odds, because again, our kids are going to face challenges and we want them to beat those odds. So I want us to imagine that place of taking our kids there. Before I tell my story, this is a piece where I want to have you guys interact with me a little bit here, because I can't see you out there really talk to you though. But I want to ask you a question. What does it mean to have hope? Just put it in the chat box real quick. Malia and others, if you guys can just tell me what you're seeing people put in the chat box, that'll be helpful. So what does it mean to have hope? Just throw it in the chat box real quick, and we'll just shout out what we're seeing. Hope, what does it mean? Give you a moment here, because this is going to be one critical aspect of storytelling. So I want everyone to kind of get this here. What does it mean to have hope?
Dr. Watson, I'm seeing a way through,
Yes,
belief in a better day,
yes.
expectation of goodness unseen,
Oh, I love it.
motivation to go on.
Yes, they're right on. Thank you for sharing that. Here, I want everyone to get your cameras out. I want everyone to take a picture of this slide right here. There's gonna be a number of slides I'm gonna have you take pictures of throughout. I want everyone to take a picture of this slide right here, okay? Because everything that was stated in the chat box was right on point. The acronym I like using for hope is have only positive expectations. So that means it has to start with our children who are going through some of these issues of abuse and neglect. They have to know on the other side of it, there's going to be something positive waiting for them. And they can actually get beyond this. And if there are people who have actually been there and suffered some of those same consequences and have come out on the other side, and for the most part, they've been able to turn into something positive. So it starts with telling our young people that, you know, what you're going through is not your fault, but on the other side of it, there's a brighter side to it. And when we start telling those stories of hope to the politicians and to our general society, we need to be able to give stories that are going to be motivating and inspirational. So those stories of hope will be very, very critical in that aspect. So I want everyone to make sure you keep this, take a picture of that, have only positive expectations. That is something that's absolutely critical when we start talking about hope. So I want to share with you my story of hope and some of the neglect that I went through as well as a kid. So as I mentioned before, I'm originally from Denver, Colorado. Several years ago, I was back home in Denver, and I was actually sharing my story with the local newspaper. As I was sharing my story with the reporter, she stopped me midway through and she said, okay, you know, Mr. Watson, what you're saying sounds okay, but I need to make sure what you're saying is actually true. So she asked for my parents' names. I said, that's fine. However, don't use their names in the story. So I continued telling my story at the time. And I was living in Minnesota, went back to Minnesota where I was at. And the following day I received a phone call, and it was a reporter. And she said, Mr. Watson, typically when someone like you tells their story, they tend to exaggerate their story. She said, I'm actually looking at your parents' criminal background record and you're not telling your whole story. And up to this point, I had never come across my parents' criminal background record before, so I didn't have a clue of what she was talking about. But when I got a chance to see the second page of the Denver Post newspaper, the thing that left me probably most struck was her statements in the opening line. She talks about me not blinking an eye with my parents. I gave her my parents' names, and then she went on to say, when she looked at my parents' criminal background records, and after looking through them, she said, I wondered how Tommy Watson made it. And it will be several years later before I actually got a chance to see my parents' criminal background record for myself, and to look at the magnitude of neglect that I was enduring because of their criminal background record was actually astounding. So here are my parents' criminal background records. So my mother and father growing up in Denver, they were drug addicts and shoplifters. And this is what they did for a living. So my mother, 12 pages, the top part, front and back, was my mother. She was arrested 44 times. The one below, 18 pages, front and back, was my father's. So by the time I finished high school, my mother and father were arrested a total of 121 times. My first year I was born, my mother was arrested 11 times. My father was already in prison. By the time I was in third grade, I lived in numerous foster homes, crisis centers, motel rooms, lived with my grandmother several times, went to 4 different elementary schools within 1 year, bounced around from place to place, had a learning disability I didn't know anything about at the time. My teachers didn't believe in me. I didn't believe in myself. And then when I was in second grade, I found myself in a very, very different situation. My parents would leave me and my siblings for days by ourselves. It was my older sister who was in 6th grade. My second older sister was in 5th grade. I was in 2nd grade. My little brother was in 1st grade, and we had a 1-year-old baby sister who we were pretty much taking care of and raising as kids. And my older sister would stay at home with my baby sister while we went to school, not necessarily to learn, but to steal food. And we would steal food, bring it back home so my sisters could eat. And then on the weekends, we would go in grocery stores and steal food and run out and, bring the, cupcakes and potato chips back home so we could eat. And then we found ourselves in a situation where we were removed from the household and we were placed in a foster care, and we were placed in the custody of a new family, and my little baby sister was placed somewhere else. And it killed my soul and my spirit. I was very angry. We talked about neglect and just anger. It was so much anger inside of me that I didn't listen to the foster parent. And the only time we had listened, we did listen, was when we had visitors come to the house. So one particular day, a lady shows up with her son. We were told to go out in the hallway and talk to this young man while the adults spoke. Got to the hallway, my 2 older sisters went to one side. Me and my little brother went to the other side. The young man stood in the middle. And one of my sisters asked a question of the young man. She said, so what grade are you in? The young man looks kind of puzzled. He says, I'm in 3rd grade. Why? So my sister started talking back and forth again. The other one comes, she says, so what's your name? The young man looks kind of puzzled again. He's like, my name is Lavere. Why? Well, suddenly my sister started getting all giddy and happy and stuff. And me and my little brother looked at each other. It was like, this is embarrassing. They have a crush on this kid. Well, after a couple of moments to jump around, they stopped. They said, your name is not Lavere. Your name is actually Laverio. You are brother. You are brother. That was the first time ever I met my oldest brother by pure coincidence in a foster home. Mind blowing. The following year as a 3rd grader, I was now placed in the custody of my aunt with my younger brother, my younger sister. My 2 older sisters was shipped off to different foster homes. And behind that smile was lots of anger. And my only goal as a 3rd grader was to join the local Crips that were now in Denver, Colorado, who had migrated from LA, because that's what I wanted. That's what I thought I needed at the time. My aunt was pretty smart. She got me involved in basketball. And basketball literally saved my life, because many things I was looking for in the world of gangs, I received from playing sports. A sense of belonging, great male mentor coach, connection with other kids who have similar goals and dreams. So basketball was my go-to thing at this particular time. By my 7th grade year of school, I was back with my mother and father for 2 years. We found ourselves in another very difficult situation. It was a beautiful sunny day in the city of Denver. I was in my summer before my 8th grade year of school. I'm at home watching television, and suddenly there was a knock at the door. And I go to the door, and to my surprise, there stood the police and local sheriffs. I'm like, whoa, why are you here? Well, they had informed me that my parents had not paid the rent, and we had to get out. And I'm like, whoa, get out. So I said, you mean in like 60 days, right? They said, no. I said, you mean like 30 days, right? They said, no. I said, so when are we supposed to get out? And they said, right now. I said, right now? Where are we supposed to go? Where are we supposed to go? They said, that's not our problem. And they went into our house and started taking all of our stuff and started throwing it into the front yard. I just kept saying, so so where are we supposed to go? After some time, I finally mustered up the courage to leave the house. I remember walking down the stairs, listening to everything being thrown in the yard behind me breaking. I took a moment to look up, and all the porches around me, and they were all my friends, laughing, giggling, and making jokes in the lowest point of my life. And there was a piece of me that wanted to break down and start crying right then and there. But I kept it together. Later on that evening, I couldn't keep it together as we actually watched the folks go into our yard and take everything we owned, and there was nothing we can do about it. From there, my family of 9 of us moved into this one motel room. It was our 7th motel room, 9 people, 1 room, two beds, 1 bathroom for my entire 8th grade year of school. My go-to place, and mind you, 6 of the adults in that room, all 6 of them were all drug addicts. So me and my little brother and little sister left to fend for ourselves. Our clothes sat wrapped in the corner in sheets. They were dirty. We were talked about at school, not only by my classmates, but also by my teachers as well. And it was heartbreaking. The thing I continued to do at this time was play basketball. So I was walking almost 10 miles from this motel room to the Glen Arm Recreation Center in Denver, Colorado, in the city of Denver, to stay involved in basketball. Ran into a coach who talked to me and my friends about the possibility of going out to high school, just suburban high school, we could possibly go to college. And I remember getting very, very excited for the first time in my life. I got excited and began to see myself beyond the neighborhood. But I also knew out of all the guys on the basketball team, my parents were probably going to be the ones who weren't going to support me going to the school. So I simply didn't tell them, got my grades together. And this is the power of hope, okay? This is why our young people need to know that there's a brighter day on the other side of it. So while living in that motel room, these are all the awards I won. I became the 1-on-1 basketball champ of my school, the wrestling champ of my school. I got on the honor roll for the very first time ever in my academic career, got on the honor roll. And then I won an award that was given to a handful of kids in the entire state of Colorado, the Colorado Youth Citizenship Award, while living in that motel room. So there's no doubt about it. When our kids have hope, no matter what situation they're facing right now with abuse and neglect, we can show them that there's another way for them to thrive. They will meet the challenge. Well, I got a chance to get into school, and I went and told my mother and father, and their response was, no, you're not going out to the school. Well, my mom and dad ended up going back to prison again in my 8th grade year of school. And now me and my little brother and little sister moved with my grandmother, my other grandmother, who came out of retirement to take care of us and moved us into the heart of our neighborhood, which is now being called Little Compton now because of all the gang members that have moved from LA. We're now in Denver. It was my grandmother's wish that I go out to this high school and do well every day. So I was taking 3 city buses one way to high school every day, starting at 6:30 in the morning. I would get home anywhere between 8 and 10 o'clock at night when sports was over with. Did this for a number of years. By my junior year of high school, my grandmother had developed Alzheimer's disease and had to be placed into a nursing home. In the meantime, my little brother got heavily involved in gangs and taking a gun to school and attempted to shoot a kid in school, was now being shipped off to juvenile prison. My older brother, who I met in foster home, was now coming back around because he had ties to the same gang as my little brother, and my older sister was out there on crack cocaine. My mom, in the meantime, gets out of prison, is trying to do the right thing, striving to get her life together, but no one would give her a second chance for employment. So my mom eventually turns to selling drugs to take care of us. And in the middle of my senior of high school, I received a daunting call. My mother had just been busted for selling drugs and was on her way back to prison again. Wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. In the meantime, I was an All-American high school football player, had over 30 scholarship offers, was in the newspaper, and my life was falling apart. Here's an example of all the different addresses that the coaches were trying to find me at. I was living all over the place. They could not find me. And then finally, my academic struggles, my grades were absolutely horrible in this time. But one of the things that I'm proud of as I look back today is I did not stop going to school. I knew that school was going to be connected to somehow a better future for me. So you see that 0 at the second line from the bottom. I missed no days of school, even in the midst of all the challenges I was facing. Here I am on my national signing day to go play football at the University of Minnesota. All the media, you can't see, I'm in the principal's office. The media stuff in there, they're celebrating my success on the football field as I'm signing my letter. But what they didn't know was in the back of my mind, I'm wondering where am I going to sleep at tonight? Because I eventually found myself homeless and had a friend of the family eventually came through and said, I'm going to let you sleep on my floor, but you got to be out come May. So I struggled to graduate from high school. My family put me on a Greyhound bus nearly 30 years ago, and they sent me from Denver to University of Minnesota on a Greyhound bus, and they said, good luck. I'd never moved back home. So I got to University of Minnesota. My mom was in prison. My dad was in prison. My older brother was in prison. My grandmother was my last legal guardian, was in a nursing home. Oldest brother's back there gangbanging. Older sister's back there on crack cocaine. I did not have a home address to return to in Denver, Colorado. So I got to the University of Minnesota. I was solely focused on football. Well, that football dream was looking pretty good until an injury took place and changed my whole life. But even with the injury, I still wasn't bought into academics and schooling being the place that was going to totally change my life until I was back in a situation where I was visiting Denver my third year of college, and my mom was out of prison again. She and I were picking up my brother's girlfriend. I was driving this minivan, and I was pulling up in front of the house to try to parallel park the minivan. And I noticed there was a black Cherokee at the corner kind of sitting there. I didn't pay it much mind. I continued to try to parallel park the minivan. The vehicle starts coming our way. And with the moments I start hearing pop, pop, boom, 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 boom. There was gunshots. And I remember hearing gunshots before, but something in my mind was saying, you better get down. So with my foot on the brake, I was bracing myself, ready to take a bullet. And I leaned over, covering my head and chest area, preparing to take a bullet. And that's when the glass started shattering from the van as the bullets started ricocheting through the van, started falling on me. And I remember thinking to myself, man, I'm about to die. And then suddenly the gunshot stopped. And I popped up to see if I had been shot. And I hadn't been, thankfully. My mother was fine, the young lady was fine. But I stepped from the minivan, looked at the van. There was a bullet that was lodged in the bottom window of the driver's door that was meant to kill me. And at that particular time, I told myself that I had to go back to Minnesota and change the course of my life. And that was all going to start with education. So I went on, got my degree, started sharing my story with others to motivate people. And then I went on and got one degree. And I said, you know, one degree is not enough. I got to get 4 degrees. And I got my doctorate of education. And I became a school principal. Now, for you guys out there who may have grown up in the country and love horses, I grew up in the inner cities. I don't do horses. The only time you'll ever see me on a horse. I was a school principal. My students met a major reading goal. We have 1 suspension for the entire year. And I told them I would jump on a horse. There you have it. You'll never, ever see Dr. Watson on a horse ever again. So mark that one there. So as I wrap up with my story, I want to share this with you though. It's important for our young people. It's important for you to also have hope, because some of us have been through some of the same challenges that our kids and families are facing. That's why we're doing the work we're doing. It's important for us to know that a brighter day is going to come. We have to have that hope factor. So when I look at a lot of the pictures from my past, this is probably one of the ones that mean the most to me. I got a chance to take this picture on top of the University of Minnesota football stadium with the trunk that I was once homeless living out of. And that symbolizes to me what hope is all about, big time. And just in case you're interested, my book is called A Face of Courage. You can reach out to me or check it out online. It's been turned into a movie that we're hoping to have produced here next year as well. So just keep your eyes and ears out for that as well. So why stories? Again, I told you that I did my master's work on stories. I did my doctoral work on stories. Stories have been found to be universal, transferable, and timeless. And they are a great way to bring awareness to issues that we're facing in our society. Stories also connect people emotionally and inspire them to take action. Even in the sales industry right now, they're trying to coax a lot of their salespeople to do more stories, because when you tell more stories with potential buyers, you have a better connection with them and you can get more of an emotional buying situation. Our stories also inspire others to give and to certainly learn more about our mission and causes as well. And then finally, there is no greater way than to connect people with our organization than connect a story which gives people a face to make a connection with. So stories are very, very critical. You know, when you think about movements that really utilize stories to change the social and political climate, there's probably no better example than the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement really humanized the struggle for a lot of individuals who weren't necessarily faced with a lot of those same challenges, who were growing up in the West and the North. And it really began to change a lot of the policies in our country, at least on paper. These are some of the policies that really were impacted by the social influence of the civil rights movement. So there was an end to segregation on paper. We got to revisit these things now. Voter suppression on paper was impacted. Employment discrimination on paper was also impacted. And of course, housing discrimination was another one. So again, we can use stories to impact social and political change by looking at a lot of the things that took place in the civil rights movement. So we start talking about stories. Our stories connect with 2 things. It connects with our head, and a good story connects with our heart as well. Take a look at these 2 pictures. So from the brain perspective, whenever a story is told, our brains begin to connect. I'm going to show a little bit more about this in a moment. Whenever our brains can make the connection between each other, it also opens up the door for us to make the heart connection as well. So let's look at how our brains are connected by stories. One of the things that probably happened as I was sharing my story with you, and when you hear stories in general, is that your brain now begins to synchronize with the story of the teller. So the brains of the listener and the teller begin to synchronize with each other. The other thing that happens that is very, very astounding when you start telling stories is there's a mirror effect that takes place. So now, even though you may not necessarily have gone through the same things I went through, you may find a story or an experience that may be similar that begins the connection. And of course, when we start telling stories, it activates pretty much every area of our brain. Continuing on in terms of chemicals that are released when we start talking about releasing stories, dopamine is a very, very strong chemical that's released when it comes to stories because it releases a lot of the emotions that are connected with stories, okay? Cortisol gives us a chance to increase intention and memory when we're hearing stories. And lastly, this gives us a chance to connect on an empathetic level, which is very, very important because again, if we're going to impact change, we have to be able to allow people to walk somewhat in our shoes. So having a story gives people a chance to increase the connection and compassion for others and individuals when they hear stories. So how can we use our stories to impact social changes and political changes in our society? The first thing we have to understand is we have to know what's at stake, what's the interest of the people that we're trying to target, okay? What's most important to them? So in this particular situation, let's talk about our politicians. Most of our politicians, their interest lies around getting the biggest bang for their buck. They want to be connected with things that have been successful. They want to be connected with things where they have distributed money and they got a chance to see great impact. So that is one of the great interests of our politicians. So that carries over to number two, that we have to focus on stories that are going to give hope. And those stories that really represent what the organization stands on and really, models and becomes a blueprint for what we do. The third piece is very, very, very important because when it comes to telling stories, we don't want to just tell a story. We want to show a story. And that's quite different. I want everyone to take your cameras out again because I want to show you the difference between telling a story and showing a story, okay? I'm not going to go through each point here, but I want everyone to at least take a picture of this because as you begin to tell your story or tell the story of clients and some of the young people and prepare yourself to share that with politicians or the general public, you got to be able to show it and not just tell it. Because I remember years ago, there was a gentleman who had a similar story to mine, and his book had gotten horrible reviews. I'm saying, why is that? Because the story is so similar to mine. And I remember reading the book and not feeling any connection. And he was telling his story from like 10,000 feet versus bringing people to the ground level and showing them his story. So people did not feel any connection with the story. So when you're telling a story, you're telling the stories, it's not a narrative that you're just simply just stating facts about individuals. You want to show, you want to paint a picture, you want to create details, you want to create a fictional name of individuals who are showing what your mission is about, showing what the opportunity is about, showing what the need is about. So you want to give as much detail as possible when you're sharing those stories so that the listener can really feel it. So I told you I had a surprise for you. This is another way, and some of you guys may be very, very artistic out there, great storytellers. I am not very creative. So I'm always amazed when I go to this piece of it that I was able to pull this off. I don't know, Malia, did I tell you I was a rapper, Malia?
You did not tell me that you were a rapper.
Surprise, surprise, surprise. I am a one-time rapper. So I'm going to show you guys this one time, okay? This is my surprise. For some of you who may be very, very creative, this may be another great way for you to utilize telling stories to get out to the general public and to share with our politicians as well. So here is my one shot at telling my story, and then we're going to open up for questions. Here we go.
My scars tell me that I have survived. tell me that I'm alive.
Sitting here all alone. Man, what in the world went wrong? Mama, when are you coming back home? Why'd you leave me for so long? Remember the past is so painful. How in the world can I be thankful? My spirit is becoming more hateful. Had love since I was in the cradle. All the foster homes and no family left me bitter and feeling kinda lonely. Man, will anybody ever want me? Will it just be me and no family? See you locked in chains, didn't ease my pain. Left me feeling ashamed out in the rain. Can't explain the pain, how I stay sane. Don't like the game, will it ever change?
Scars tell me that I have survived it over and over. My scars tell me that I'm alive. My scars tell me that I have survived it over and over. My scars tell me that I'm alive.
All the motel rooms and no address. Did very little to relieve the stress. Everything around me says I'm doomed. Hoping tomorrow come real soon. Mom and dad left and betrayed us, giving the dope man all our stuff. Will I ever get a chance to trust again? Man, I'm lonely and have no friends. My life is broken, filled with void. Everything around me is getting destroyed. Will I ever get a chance to experience joy? People I like, I now avoid. How many parents leave the kids for days? How many leave and go their separate ways? How many grandmas raising babes? How many? You'd be amazed.
Scars tell me that I have survived it over and over. My scars tell me that I'm alive. My scars tell me that I have survived it over and over. My scars tell me that I'm alive.
Dreaming of sports would be my way out. Increase my education to fill my doubt. Found out school could end my drought. College, what's that all about? Little did I know at the time what I thought buried me in my decline was giving me strength and growing my mind, allowing me to stand the test of time. All of the years of kids laughing has now paved the way for people asking, how's your life been so long lasting? The pain is now feel my passion. Education and sports be my beam and light. Guide my life, trying to stay tight. Hustling, grinding with all my might. Holding on my dreams till daylight. My message to you on your darkest night. There's a lesson to learn. You'll be alright. Thank God above and keep your fists tight. But whatever you do, keep up the fight. Resilience is all about your season. Know your life has purpose and a reason. Now that you know, go get some. Yours truly, Dr. Watson.
My scars tell me.
All right, there you have it. So you got a chance to see my one shot at rapping. But again, it's another creative way to share your story. Some of you guys are probably far more creative than I am. So utilize that to share the stories of your clients and others out there as well. So I've had a chance to talk a lot, but I want you guys to really, really know that stories are a great way to impact our general society. Stories are a great way to impact our politicians as well. And not just telling a story, but again, showing a story. So again, I think we have a number of people going to help us out in the chat box. If you have a question at this particular time, feel free to put it in the chat box. Malia, anyone else out there have any comments in terms of what you're seeing? Any
Yeah,
questions?
so I'd love to share with you a few of the comments in the chat. One is that the rose that grew through concrete, so powerful and inspirational, that someone shared while you were sharing your story. And this is an awesome story telling us we cannot give up on anyone. Yes, everyone has a story. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for your story. And your story of hope pushes us to advocate for person-centered, family-focused policies in our justice, education, and child welfare systems, not cases, but hearts, souls, and potential.
That's right. I love it. Yes.
And as your rap came on, Tika shared this in the comments. I learned to hear and see rap differently during a child and family team meeting. A youth rap that she had heard became a game changer for her.
Wow. That is awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Yes.
And so many thank you and awesome. I hope you have a chance to kind of look through all of the praise in the chat. I'm looking to see if there are any particular questions. I have a question for you. As I'm listening to your story, I'm thinking about this. And one of the things that we've talked about in these institutes is ensuring that people are in a safe place to share their story. And that they, are surrounded by people who are protecting them to a certain degree, right, while they're sharing their story. So I'm curious if you'd like to share a little bit with us about how you got to the place where you could share your story.
That is a great question. I think Felicia or either Elijah hit on this as well during their presentations, that it's very, very important for those of us who have some experience with some of these things to begin to share our stories, because when you give, you get in return. So for me, when I was in college, one of my teammates began sharing a little bit of his story with me, and it made me comfortable to begin sharing a little bit of my story with him as well. And we did this when we were on a lot of our trips to a lot of our games. And eventually I began to see that my story had a lot of similarities between his story, even though there were some things that were very, very different. There were some things that connected us. But in sharing our stories, we became a lot closer, and I began to become a lot more confident in sharing my story, had more courage to be able to share it as well. So I think those of us who are comfortable sharing our stories, being a blueprint or a model for our families and our students to be able to share some of the trials and tribulations we've overcome and to show the hope that has come out of them, gives them courage to be able to share their own stories as well. Great question.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Just knowing that you're sharing your story today may inspire someone to want to share their story. They'll see something that maybe they've experienced reflected in what you're sharing, and encourage them to be brave and share their story. So I appreciate that. We also had another question that is, what was the why that kept your story alive?
Yes, that's a great question. So early on, my why was the fear of being like my parents. So I didn't want to be like my parents. So that kept me going. But when I discovered the opportunities that came about through sports, that became my why, because every statistic in my neighborhood was telling me that I was going to be the next gang member, drug dealer, the next kid to die early. And when I began to look at the statistics around professional sports, I began to dream bigger. So my dream needed to be bigger than my circumstances. For a lot of our kids and a lot of us in general, we have to dream bigger than our circumstances. So I began to dream about the NFL. No, I never made it to the NFL because of injury. However, that dream allowed me to elevate myself above a lot of the circumstances that I was facing because of that one dream. So I'm really big on having a dream that's bigger than our circumstances. So even when we're talking about our clients, we have to dream big for them when they can't dream for themselves. We have to dream big when we are faced with, insurmountable odds, because that's what gets us through those tough times.
No, you're right. Thank you. Yeah, the sports and it sounds like you had some coaches too that were there with you and encouraging you, and just having people around you that were helping to create that space for you, where you could, have hope, right? That was a space where you could have hope and something to focus your time and your talent and your attention to during that really, really challenging time.
Can I make another point about this as well? Because I think as adults, we hear young people say that they want to be professional athletes, and we say, oh, well, your chances of going to slim or whatever, I tell adults don't do that. I tell teachers don't do that. I tell parents to don't do that. If you have a student, no matter what it is they want to be, let them dream big, because there has never, ever been an NFL player to go to the NFL who has not gone to college first. So tell the kid how to get to college. And then if the NFL works out for them, great. But if not, they have at least experienced 3 years of college, or at least experienced a high school experience where they've been shooting to try to at least get to a 4-year college. So let the bar stay high. Let life show them in themselves whether they're going to go to the NFL or not. Even in high school, the majority of high school NBA players have come through college in order to get to the NBA, though. So let that dream be out there, and that's a dream that can keep a kid going. Don't crush it for them, no matter what it may be.
Yes, Tika says yes, yes. That is, let kids dream and aspire to their highest potential, right? Like, I love that. Well, I don't see any other questions in the chat, but if you have a couple minutes and want to read through all the comments, please do. Everyone is so grateful that you're here today with us and for you sharing your story. And thank you for your words and being here today. I hope that we all have the opportunity to watch your film. As you know, I'm going to send a follow-up email in about 6 months to all of the
Yes.
participants. So if there's anything you want me to share, then I would be happy to do that. And thank you for being here today. I really, really do appreciate
Thank
it.
you for having me and thank you for the work you're doing. And everyone out there, know that you're making a difference. God bless you guys. Have a great day.
Thank you. So we are going to take a short break here. Let's take an 8-minute break. So that way we can keep it even and come back right at 10:40. Okay, so let's take a break. If you'd like to go and read about our speakers, I'll put the link in the chat if you'd like to do that over the break. Get up, walk around. Glad you're here. When we come back, we will hear from our panelists. So see you at 10:40. right, welcome back from the break. Hope you all had an opportunity to stand up and stretch your legs. Next, we are going to welcome Rose Hoban, Amy Dickey, and Jessica Aguilar. Before we get started, Jessica is going to be speaking in Spanish. So if you joined us in the introduction or have not yet chosen or after the introduction, or you have not chosen a language, please do so now. So at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a circle where it's English or Spanish. Please choose the language that you would like to hear. And Jessica will be speaking in Spanish, and you should hear the interpretation into English. Please message us in the chat if you do have any problems with that. So welcome, Rose and Jessica and Amy. I will turn it over to you.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me? Well, good morning. I'm so excited to be part of this next panel, and thanks for inviting us. There's been some amazing stories already this morning. I've really enjoyed hearing from Elijah and Dr. Watson. And this morning, we're going to talk about stories in action. We'll have a conversation with Jennifer Aguilar, who is a parent advocate for NC Child, and Amy Dickey, who's a family partner with Parent Voice. But I'm going to kick things off with some opening remarks about framing your stories in context of how to really talk to legislators about getting your point across to them. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and I have a short presentation. Here we go. And I've spent a lot of years now at the legislature, and I've gotten pretty good at telling stories, but more than anything, I've seen other people who have done a terrific job of sharing their stories and gotten lessons from them on how you can share your stories with legislators to have more impact. You know, one thing I've learned is that it's really important for lawmakers and policymakers to see the results of the policies they pass, but it all goes back to having a good story. And the best use of stories comes with a very specific and intentional steps laid out to reach your goal. So, you know, I always tell people to start with having a good story. Right? It's, you know, what are the stories that you tell your friends? What are the stories that you tell folks that you know that are compelling, the things that make them respond to you, right? So that's the hallmark of a good story. I always tell folks to have 3 bullet points, maybe 4, no more than 5, because you really need to hone your message down. So once you have your story, it's really helpful to just boil it down into a couple of bullet points so that you can talk easily about them. And you need to be able to, you know, recite those bullet points in your sleep. And when I say recite them in your sleep, I mean recite them in your sleep. This is a picture of me after I had surgery. And I tell this story all the time as an object lesson, but they rolled me up from the recovery room, and it was shift change. And the nurse who was taking care of me says to me, "Oh, I hear you're a nurse. You know, where do you work?" And I said, "Well, I no longer practice." And she said, "Oh, what do you do now?" And I said, "I'm the editor of North Carolina Health News, trends, stories that you need to know about the healthcare system in North Carolina." And my husband tells that story because I don't remember it. But it talks to how I had my stories down. I could literally do it in my sleep. You should know it cold. You should be able to do it in your sleep too. That should be the level of familiarity you have with your talking points. When it comes to talking points, one of the things that I also tell people is try out your stories on other people and look for acronyms and jargon and eliminate them. Just eliminate them. You know, people who've spent a lot of times on their advocacy issue, they're really deep into their stories, and they They don't even notice when acronyms and jargon creep in. I think one of the pieces of jargon that we hear a lot these days is involuntary commitments, or IVCs, when we talk about the mental health system, or we talk about mental health crisis. And I say to people, you need to describe what that is. Don't just say I was in crisis. Say, or, my son was in crisis. Say, my son was hearing voices, or my son wanted to hurt himself. That tells more than just kind of using this term, this kind of umbrella term that we're very used to, or you might be very used to as an advocate in talking with other advocates, but that lawmakers might not understand. Also, don't get too caught up in grammar. Just sound like yourself. You don't have to sound perfect. I show this slide because I joke that you need to think about lawmakers a little bit like they're baby birds. You need to kind of pre-digest your talking points and have them ready to feed it straight to them. And I don't say that in a derogatory way. It's, lawmakers, they have to cover a lot of topics, and they have to know those topics. So that's why the 3 bullet points, that's why really simple language. And that's why having it something ready for them, especially if you have a 1-page handout that's got your 3 main bullet points on them, that's really helpful for these folks, right? Because they need to have something that they can digest, that they can talk about with their colleagues. Let me see. Then the other thing that has become really important in the current legislative and policymaking environment is to do your math. I tell people all the time, when I first started working at the legislature in the aughts, the Democrats were in control and stories really carried the day. But, the Republicans they're very pragmatic, and they want to know what's your return on investment. So I'm always telling advocates to do an analysis, do a financial or an economic analysis on what their policy will mean in terms of financial impact on the state and on a lawmaker's constituency. And then there's also the issue of having the right messenger. Partnership, there's that old line about politics making for strange bedfellows. You may find yourself partnering with someone that you don't particularly agree with on a lot of policy issues, but if you have common cause on your particular issue, they may be the best messenger. I think some of the advancement on Medicaid expansion that's taken place in the past year has been because of the newer messengers who are delivering that message to the Republican majority at the legislature. This gentleman here is Dale Wiggins. He's the Republican County Commission Chair in Graham County, and he's talked very openly about the devastation of not having health insurance for many of his constituents. Another messenger has been Terry Johnson, who's the Alamance County Sheriff. He's a pretty controversial guy, but one of the things that he's noted is that Medicaid expansion would help people who are incarcerated both during their incarceration and afterward, and here's the big thing that he makes the point of, they would help the bottom lines of county sheriff's departments. And that's been a pretty powerful message. Republican State Senator Kevin Corbin from the western part of the state, he's been a really powerful voice for Medicaid expansion, and he's helped move the needle in the leadership at the legislature, and they'll acknowledge his role in doing that. And finally, Casey Cooper, who's the head of the Cherokee Hospital in Swain County, he's been traveling the western part of the state, talking to county commissions. He's primarily the reason why there's a lot of county commissioners who've gotten on board with Medicaid expansion. So having that right messenger is really important. Then finally, I think we've all talked about this all morning, having that face to tell your story. I love this quote from Queen Elizabeth, "I have to be seen to be believed." People need to see how policies affect real people, lawmakers, policymakers, both positive and negative, right? They need to see, oh, this policy is negatively affecting your constituent. this policy is positively affecting your constituent. Don't just go with asks, go with wins and bring those to lawmakers so that they have something to tout when they talk to their colleagues. Finally, practice. You know, President Obama used to talk about how he would get in front of a mirror and he would practice his speeches. He would practice his talking points. He would practice his cadence. So you can do the same thing. I did that this morning. I was practicing what I'm going to talk about so that I would sound like myself. Talk to your dog, talk to your spouse, talk to your kids. They should be tired of you by the time you're ready to present. And I'm going to give you a quick case study of probably the most strategic advocate I've ever met. Some of you know him. His name is Robert Childs. You know, and he's the former head of the North Carolina Harm Reduction Coalition. And when I first met him in 2014, he told me his goal was to have syringe and needle exchange in North Carolina. And frankly, I told him he was crazy, but he was so strategic and he had a plan. Again, the best use of stories comes with very specific and intentional steps laid out to reach your goal. So to get there, Robert started with law enforcement, the right messenger. He made the case to them that when sheriff's deputies were searching people who were arrested on drug charges, that they were getting stuck with used needles, and that had the deputies freaked out. And so he showed them this photograph of, you know, what happens when a needle, and he said, you know, a needle it's used 6 times, there's lots of nooks and crannies for viruses to hang on. And this, you know, this really had the sheriff's concern, rightfully so, right? So then he got sheriffs on board to come to the legislature to talk about needle decriminalization initiatives. This guy on the right with the star is Carteret County Sheriff Asa Buck, who had lost several family members to overdose. So he was a messenger and he had a story. He was deeply on board, so he was a terrific advocate. Childs also found a legislative champion in Stan Bingham, who was a former sheriff. So Stan got it financially. He was able to talk to his legislative colleagues. And then finally, Robert's organization brought in people for a conference one day, and it was all people to talk about their kids who'd overdosed and had been left by their friends who were afraid to call 911. These folks told their stories. One of them was a sheriff's deputy from Georgia who had lost her daughter, who was left on the side of the road by the folks she was using drugs with. Talk about a gut punch. You know, and all of this helped the harm reduction folks get past needle and syringe decriminalization that opened the door for needle exchanges, and they also worked on a Good Samaritan law. Finally, I tell people, take the time to get to know your lawmaker. You know, it's not going to happen just when you showing up in their office on a busy legislative day for 5 minutes. During the off period of legislative time, take the time to invite them to your facility. Take the time to offer to buy lunch for your legislator. That whole getting to know you, it really helps if you can get to know your legislator before you come to them with an ask. So with that, we're going to move on now to talking to our advocates, and we're going to start with asking some questions and having our advocates introduce themselves and tell some of their stories. So I'm going to start with Amy. Amy, just tell me a little bit about yourself. What brought you to your work and what's important about it?
Thank you, Rose. I really wish I'd heard your presentation years ago because it took me a while to get to the point where I knew how to tell my story. And it's still something that I can struggle with my economy of words for making sure that I stick with the intent, right, of why I'm telling it. As I've practiced that, learning how to tell different parts of my story that are relevant to the audience, I have to think, what part is relevant today? You know, and when I thought about speaking today, there was a part of me that wanted to talk about my childhood because I've come to the realization that it plays such a major role on the parent that I became. right? And on the wife and person that I am today. But the reality is I'm here today as a family partner and as a parent, right? And so while that led me to that point, what's most relevant, in a time crunch would be, how did that occur? Like, what relevance does that have? Why am I speaking on something like that? I have 3 kids. I have 3 wonderful kids. That's my first job, right? Over and above being a family partner and being passionate about mental health and access to care. My first job is my kids. And I can honestly say that I credit them with a lot of things. And there was a point that I didn't think I would be able to say that, right? But they taught me how to use my voice. They taught me, I found my voice because of my kids and helping them, get the services that they need. And it was in our life experiences and the things that we experienced that I think maybe I even saw it in them first, right? The things that they had to overcome, that I was inspired, right? To, as Dr. Watson said, I found hope, right? Even in my darkest days, even when things were, adversity, I guess would be the best way to say it. I found a way to recognize where I was blessed and where I was privileged and things that I was grateful for. And I tried my best to instill that in my kids. And today I can say that we're all in a position that I think that we approach life with gratitude, right? That we are better off today for having come through the things that we came through. And so I try to focus on the lessons that I learned. And in doing that, let me even step back. Before I realized that, right? It was about surviving. That's what helped me survive. And that was the part that was relevant to my childhood. Those were like skills that I had honed that carried into me doing that. But I didn't yet know that there was a way that you could do that proactively, right? That you could be in front of your story and that you could help others from your story, that you didn't have to be, a survivor, that you didn't have, like, a victim was a mentality that I refused to have, right? But instead, that you can be a proponent and you can be a supporter and you can elevate things and address stigma and shame and share your story and how you got there. And I found that in dark times, with multiple residential placements and my kids, struggling and a lot of negative things happening to us. I did what I used to do, which was research, right? And I went out and I researched, how do you do this? How do you, do that? And I learned about our system of care. But I still stayed in survival mode. It wasn't until I learned about family partners and peer support and, Al-Anon and NAMI and Mental Health America and Parent Voice that I became the person that I think I am today, or that I am becoming, right? And I began the quest that I am on, right? To know better and do better, right? And I feel very, very blessed today that I have reached a point that I can honestly say that I am grateful for all of the experiences that I have had, because I am better off for it. My family is better off for it, right? And I want to pay that forward. And I want other parents to know how to harness that, and then to, own their story, to accept it, and to share it if that's, if they're looking to affect change or support others.
Wow, that's terrific. Thank you so much, Amy. And Jessica, how about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to this work and what's important about it to you.
Importante para ti. Thank you. In my case, I am a mom, just like Amy. I have my 2 kids, twins, Luis and Christian. And just like Amy, they are my everything. They are my why. They are my reason. When they were born, for me, it was very tough because I couldn't speak English at all. I went to the hospital as an emergency because I had preeclampsia and I had a lot of complications. I was for 1 week without getting to know my kids. I didn't know anything about them. They would call me every 5 minutes to ask me for permission for things that I couldn't even understand because they came in English. I say yes because I assumed that they would do the best in order to care for my kids. And all of this really branded me or really made me frustrated because I didn't feel like I could be a good mother. I couldn't understand what was happening to my kids. After they gave them to me after a week of being in the NICU, and they told me that they were going to maybe not live more than 24 hours. I felt so blessed to have them with me. And I started to struggle because I had to live at the hospital 3, 4 times a week, maybe get an hour of sleep because every 3 hours I had to feed them and there was an hour difference between one baby and the other. So I had only 1 hour to sleep. So it was very tough. After all this, they gave me a diagnosis in the spectrum. It started with Luis, and then it started with my other son, Christian. When I saw myself in this situation and I realized that I didn't understand what was happening with my kids, I didn't know what autism was. I've never heard of this. When I saw myself with all of these situations, I couldn't really get on the phone and call institutions and organizations because they would say, sorry, no Spanish, and they would hang up. It was very frustrating. It made me feel the worst mother in the world. I felt like I wasn't trained to have my kids. So that became my why. And that's why I met someone, Annette. I'm going to eternally be grateful that told me, hey, we are forming a parents group in Junior County. And I started to go because even though I had the diagnosis, I wasn't really accepting it, you know? And that was making everything very difficult. And that made it very difficult to understand the situation. Thanks to listening to other parents telling their stories, thanks to listening to parents that had lived what I had lived at the moment, I understood that I needed to understand my kids' diagnosis to be able to help them, to really help them. So I started to take action. I started to investigate more about autism. Many other things. We started to create other support group for people who spoke Spanish in Junior County. From 5 ahead, because the group I was only for parents that had children 5 and below. So that's where everything started. That's where all my work began. My work is to help other parents, Spanish-speaking parents, to understand the different diagnoses of their children, not only just as a type, all conditions, all different diagnoses. I try to help. And we're also trying to help them to find their voice so that they can advocate for their children, just like I found my voice. I also want them to find their voice to help their children, to teach them that you don't need to have a story, a wonderful stories, because Dr. Watson and Elijah's stories are like, oh my God, they are impactful. And you could feel My story is not like that. I'm just a single, I'm a mom with 2 kids. Maybe not so important. Maybe it's not a big deal, but no, our stories are also important because they can generate a change. And it is a change in my life. At the moment that I decided to change things, I decided to focus on learning English, help these families, get to other organizations, volunteer with other organizations, and receive the support of all these organizations in order to support these families has generated a change. Being here, being able to speak in my language at this time, it's already a change.
Yeah.
And I think that is the most important thing of my work is making sure everybody understands that it's important to speak up, to tell our stories.
Wow, thank you for that, Jessica. How do you, we'll continue with you. How do you use storytelling in your work now? And, what problems are you trying to solve with those stories? And have you learned any, like, what are the lessons that you've learned?
Sí.
Yes. Our goal for my support group is to be able to make sure that Latina families know that they have a story to tell, and that it's important that they tell it. That it's important for them to speak up, to defend their children, and not just their children, but themselves as well. Because each one of us is going through something a bit different. So perhaps we had different circumstances, not all the same. And our culture also makes us different, or perhaps we have different problems or different stigma associated to ourselves. So I try to help these families for them to be able to advocate for themselves, so that they can really get to know more about the system and how it works. Not just the medical system, but the educational system as well. Because these systems can be very complex, very difficult to understand, and especially for somebody that does not speak English. So these all become challenges. And that is one of the main goals that we have. And the difficulty that I find sometimes is that, again, people feel like they don't have a story, or that their story is not important, or that their story is just their daily lives. But that day-to-day life is powerful because it's different to somebody else's reality. There's always something different in what you're going through.
Yep. No, that's really important to note, Jessica. How about you, Amy? How do you end up using storytelling in your work, and what are the problems that you're trying to solve and the lessons that you're learning from it?
My apologies. I didn't realize I had muted. So, in my work as a family partner, and in my volunteer work, I do storytelling because I did it before I realized what it was, right? But it helps to build relationships, right? A relatable story, and I'm always shocked to hear how much I can relate to Jessica's story. And then when you add that language barrier in there, I can't even imagine, right? But she still made that connection with me, right? And that's always shocking. So I try to use things like that to where, with an understanding, that a relatable story can expand awareness, it can offer hope, it can ease feelings of isolation, because when you're feeling things like that, you feel like you're the only one, right, that's going through it, that no one could possibly understand. It helps you get an understanding for yourself, and then give that understanding to others, right? If they take the time to stand in your shoes and imagine what it was like, then that's powerful. That empathy that comes out, right, is, I don't know how to put that in words, right? It creates conversations, it creates connection, and those conversation and that connection can affect change, both personal you know, for the person, maybe if you're offering support when I'm supporting families, or for the talking to a legislator, right? It is kind of that story in action, and that they can see what it's like if they don't intervene, or if they did intervene, you know, how the outcome would be different. And that's the primary way that I use it. And like I said, it was before I realized it, that's what I was doing. In doing so, what the biggest thing I learned was everything is unique, right? Everyone's story is unique. Everyone's story is important. Like, yes, Dr. Watson's story is amazing. But it was Jessica's story that made me tear up, right? Because I related to what she said. As a mom of twins with preeclampsia, you know, I was there, right? And I understood those feelings of inadequacy. You first get those diagnoses. That kind of connection you can't do with facts. And what I've tried to learn is how to harness that in my work. And in doing so, that's when I realized that our systems are siloed into sectors.
Mm-hmm.
But those silos don't exist in people's lives, right? The part of the that what the systems and the different agencies are doing, and how what they aim to help you, those aren't in different sectors in your life, right? One is dependent on the other. You know, a child having success and getting what they need, and a mother getting what she needs, you know, and support and stuff. It's one is interdependent on the other, right? And so if one thing falls short, it can all go bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they don't have that kind of stability and support and the things they need, if they don't receive the education that they need, you know, if someone isn't there to help them, you know, on that journey and to that realization for their self, I guess that's what I'm trying to change in my work, right? I support and empower families to harness, to identify what their story is, right? To own it, and to become their child's best advocate.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that others can realize that we're not in silos, right? We're all doing life together, and we can help one another.
You know, even though the stories are different, everyone's story is unique, you can find those common threads. And then, you know, to have someone like you and Jessica walk into a room, each with your own story, but the common threads, you know, the common threads of making sure the IEP aligns with their diagnosis, you know, aligns with the services that they're getting. You know, it becomes like that. It's almost like a chorus versus a solo, right? And that chorus just becomes so much more profound. You know, we know that some of the goals of using storytelling and advocacy and policy change is to improve inclusivity and make sure that different perspectives are represented too, right? For audiences, for all kinds of audiences, you know, not just policymakers. So Jessica, can you talk about this goal and how it's reflected in your work?
Sí. Sure. There are a lot of differences, a lot of cultural differences in this country. So this is a country that is full of immigrants. We are one of the countries that has the most immigration, right? So that means we have a lot of beautiful cultures. That means you have a whole array of countries together living here in one country. And the circumstances that each person goes through are different. So all the politicians and all the organizations should take all of that into account so that it can really help families. It is not a linear thing, or so this sort of one-dimensional thing, because you have to take into account the whole being, right? Their culture, their circumstances, their level of awareness. So that's why it's so important that everybody tell their story, right? Because my story is going to be different to Amy's story. Amy doesn't have the same difficulties that I have, for example, in speaking English, right? She speaks it beautifully. I don't. And also, I don't know so much about all the different systems here because I didn't grow up here. I wasn't born here, I didn't grow up here. So I don't really know how the medical system works or the educational system works. So actually, during the pandemic and my kids were studying online and I had to help them out with their third grade homework, I felt, did I even go to third grade? Because I didn't even understand what they were studying in third grade. So it's just completely different to how I learned it when I was in school. I do know how to do it, and I got to the same answer, but I couldn't explain the method that they were using because it is different than how they taught me. So basing ourselves in all these differences, then it is important that both the organizations and decision makers understand that we have a country full of different people, and we have to just take them into account. We need to be able to advocate for everybody that lives here. And for their lives to be better, because like Amy said, we are a whole, right? We're not in sections. We're not divided up in, so it's not like Latinos there, Americans there. No, we are all interconnected. We all live in the same society and we're all in the same boat. And if it goes under, we're all going under. But if we have to help each other out so it doesn't go under, right? So based on that, I think that is extremely important to tell our stories and to be more open, more inclusive, and not just in terms of culture, but also in terms of inclusion for people with disabilities, right? So we're talking about people that are extraordinary and that they have a different outlook and vision. They think outside of the box. So usually we all think inside the box, but these folks speak, they think differently. They have a different vision, which can actually help us to make this world even more perfect. So we need to include them, not just culturally, but also include them because maybe they have different conditions, different viewpoints, different aspects. So that is extremely important to tell our stories and to put them out there. And that is the strongest part, right? Sometimes we have a lot of stigma and we don't feel like we have anything important to say, but that is not true. We all have extremely important things that we should share. And I hope that all the politicians can listen to us and can hear us, not just in one language, but in all of our languages.
It makes me think about that analogy of the chorus, right? You don't just want all the voices to sound exactly the same. The beauty of a chorus is all the different voices, and that maybe they're singing slightly different parts. You have altos and sopranos and mezzos, right? So that they're all singing in harmony, but bringing all of everything that they bring to the table. So that's a really great point. And I think that, these messages are stronger now that they've become more inclusive. How do you work with others to help them include stories in your work? I'll stay with Jessica and then we'll ask Amy that question too.
In
our group, we try for parents and families for them to see that it is important to tell their stories. And not just stories amongst us, because sometimes we get together and we do tell our stories and somebody comes and says, yeah, you can do this. I went through that. I went through something similar. So we do support each other and our stories help us to support one another. So they're not only good to support each other, but it's also important to share them so that we can change policy, so we can eliminate stigmas, so we can change programs.
Mhm.
And so we can change the way people look at things. So the fact that right now I'm speaking here in Spanish in this conference, that's a change.
Mhm.
The fact that I can speak my own language and that all of you can still hear me through interpretation so that you can understand me, so that I can really relay my message, that is a big difference. And that is the change that we are pushing for. And that's what we're trying to accomplish and include and do with our stories.
Mhm.
So we try to work so that you can see the importance, so you can see the value that we have, and so you can see that we also have something to contribute to this country in so many respects. So this story that we have, this story that we carry, and this culture that we can contribute, it can actually help. It can help to improve many aspects. Because again, it's about being creative and thinking outside the box. Because in our countries, we go through completely different realities to the ones that we're going through here. And sometimes what we have gone through, what we have lived, can actually help to create these changes.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's the goal, to be able to have this closeness and to also create these changes at a political level.
Mhm. And Amy, like when you're including stories in your work, can you talk about how you approach it? And is there training? Like what kind of training is there? And what is it that you're trying to equip people with when you're helping them tell their
Yeah.
stories?
So again, like I said, I wish that some of the things that I've learned recently, even heard today, that I had learned early on, right? So I will say, do as we say today, not necessarily how I first approached it, right? In my work. And so I think that I was just so happy to be in a position that I could support families who were going through things that I could relate to, and that in doing so, I was able to see other areas that I could be even more grateful than I knew I should be. Like Jessica said, we're all in a storm, but we are not all in the same boat, right? And so supporting others helped me to learn that. And once I learned that, I kind of combined that with the fact that I am an outside of the box thinker. I thought, how do you get others to realize that, right? Because that's not something you can give them. You can mentor and you can support them as they realize it, right? And they grow in their confidence, and they come to a point that they own their story, they own their experiences, and that they feel, like they're in a position to then share it with others, because a story is best told when it's told from the original person, right? Like when it's their story, if and when that's possible. And so that's always my goal, is to help families be equipped to realize what their story is, what role it plays, and what are they going to do with that? Whether it's sharing that story or whether it's personal growth, right? Whether the change that they need to make is within their self, so helping them really starts with listening. When you talked about training, the hardest part for me on all of this was taking the time to stop and listen, and not just to the words that were being said, but to the energy and the emotion that was saying them, right? To be present in that moment and not try to research it and solve a problem, or give them a solution, because you can't do that. That's trying to address what's important for someone. You got to be listening to what's important to them, right? And why they're talking to you to begin with. And so that was one growth. And then that I learned probably the hard way, like a lot of lessons in life, but I try to utilize in my approach, like with families. In the training, but I just recently took a class that Jessica has also taken, and it's a storyteller training. Like I said, I wish I'd taken it years before, but instead you know, I didn't, that I wasn't seeking to go out and advocate. It kind of found me, right? So the classes that I took were more about reflective listening, you know, were about the system as a whole, but supporting people where they are, person-centered thinking, you know, and it was in doing that that I learned that I needed to remove myself from it, right? And it, like I took a training, I'm a triple P practitioner, triple P parenting practitioner. And one of the things you learn there is, you know, how to help a parent. They identify what the problem is that they want to work on. They identify, you know, what are the possible ways that to approach it. You know, you just give them the choices. You go over the different things, but they learn how to problem solve. And I kind of think of advocacy the same way. If my goal is to equip the parent to be able to, you know, grow in that way, to recognize that and to value their story, that their voice has, you know, it matters, right? Their experience matters. And it not only to them and to those who, you know, love and care for them, but it could go on to, you know, make big change for someone else if that was their goal or if that was something that they chose to do. But I think understanding that it all goes back to that listening, you know, and making sure that you accurately understood what it was they were wanting to tell. And then in doing so, you can help them continue to take the lead, right? And own their story and learn how to share it. And then actually there's no greater blessing than that, right? You know, I mean, there really is no bigger blessing than seeing a parent feel so empowered that they actually are motivated to then go on and support someone else or to try to affect change and stuff. And that's what I related to in Jessica's story, right? It wasn't just because I related to the experiences she had. I'm moved by what she did with them. And that's what I try to equip parents for, whether it's for personal growth or for advocacy, right? It's to harness that to become their best person, their best advocate for their children, you know, and to go with that going forward.
Are there, you know, what kind of barriers do you encounter? You know, I can imagine that, you know, you work so hard, you have these incredible experiences, and you take the risk, and you're going and you're telling your story to a policymaker or a lawmaker, and then it kind of doesn't have the intended impact. You know, are there cautions that you give people? Do you prepare people for sometimes that it just won't land? Like, you know, what are those barriers? What are those challenges? Can you describe a little bit of that?
Yes, so the biggest barrier for me is going to come as no surprise to those who have been listening. And that is that if words were an economy, I am not frugal, right? And so if you are going to talk to legislators or you're going to, you know, try to connect with someone to move their position, you may only have one chance. You don't know when it's coming. You don't know how long you're going to have. Another lesson I learned the hard way. But that is a barrier, and knowing that, you know, can help you address that, right? Know the audience, know when to speak up, right? And then start with that connection that you need to make. But the most important thing that I like to make sure that parents are aware of, or anyone that's listening today, before you do it, if you're going to try to harness your personal story to advocate for change, right? And not just in relating to someone else, but if you're going to speak to a reporter, you're going to, especially a reporter, but if you're going to a legislator anywhere, right? Things to remember, you know, because they're barriers, they can become bigger issues, right? Like they're cautions, right, of things that could go wrong. Don't tell anyone anything that you're not ready to tell, right? That you don't need to explain or give a caveat to, right? Because you're not going to be there when they retell it to explain that and give that context. So be careful what you tell, be prepared and ready to let it go, right? To put it out in the world, because you've already addressed that within yourself and made the choice to share that, right? And don't tell, when you're telling your story, be very careful. Find that line. Where you don't overstep. right? And tell part of someone else's story. Because it is powerful to speak your truth, but you should not out someone else or harm them in doing so, right? And so those are potential issues and things to know, right? When you're approaching barriers or you're approaching others, because you cannot control. Once you let it out, you cannot control where it goes next, right? You can choose who and when and what you say, but you cannot choose how it will land or where it will go next. And I have seen people that I have lived in my own home with my own child, you know, where the story told had wonderful intentions. The person who retold it had wonderful intentions, but it didn't necessarily stick with the context or the hope that that child had when they, you know, shared it, right? And you have to learn that. So my take on that when you're addressing those barriers or those cautions is just make sure that you own your story, right? And that you are comfortable letting it go, because you cannot control others. You can only control yourself.
Wow, that's a really powerful, it's a really important caution, Amy. Thank you so much. How about you, Jessica? You know, what are the barriers? I mean, other than language and culture, you know, two small barriers. Do you have a time when, you know, you found that telling your personal story didn't have the right impact or that it landed wrong? And how do you caution the folks in your circles about how to, you know, include storytelling or not?
Creo que una de las cosas importantes es que
I actually think that something very important is, like Amy said, that you feel comfortable to tell your story, because you may not be prepared and the emotions maybe overtake you. Maybe you start crying when it's not the right time, and then the impact, the person is kind of nervous because you're crying and they don't know how to kind of soothe you, and it's not really the story that you want to tell at that moment. So you have to be prepared to tell your story. I actually spent a lot of times, it took me a lot of effort, because I would start crying every time I wanted to tell this story that I told about my kids. So I couldn't talk. My emotions kind of overwhelmed me, and I couldn't really tell my story completely. So one of the things is, do have emotions, but don't let the emotion have you, if you will, like overtake you. Sometimes there are details that are difficult. So I guess what I'm saying is you have to be in control. I think one of the things is, as a Hispanic Latinx person, is difficult, and it's kind of the same for other people that I share in the community, of how to tell the story. In other words, the other thing is to only tell the most important. Like, you know, they say the elevator kind of story. It's so hard for us Hispanics, I tell you. We like to talk and we like to add a lot of detail, and we want to say a lot of things. So telling a story in 2 minutes for us is such a challenge. It's so difficult. And being able to focus and what's most important, it's so hard, because for you in your story, the details are so important. It's your story. So I had to put my story on draft, and then start taking things, and then start taking things, and then summarize the summary of my story until I was able to make it in 2 minutes. But I probably had 20 drafts. So, and even now. So this is tough. The other thing has to do with overcoming fear. Sometimes we're very shy to speak in English, or that somehow this can come back to me negatively. that stuff, it also has to do with training. I understand English, I learned to speak English, but there is no training on how to tell your story. And in Spanish, we don't have, or maybe there are, they're not in the right schedule. So we want these stories to come out, but we might not have the resources to support these families to be able to have the training they need to tell the story. So that's why it's so important to help on these families to tell the story. Like Amy said, I've been with Amy in many training that we're trying to have these trainings in Spanish so that we can reach a lot of families that have incredible stories. And I can't tell their story. They have to tell their story. What I can do is maybe help have them have the right tools so that they can tell their story.
You know, that editing process is so difficult. You know, I work with a lot of young reporters, and I'm always like, we need to edit it out. And in journalism or in writing, we call it killing your darlings, to take out all of those wonderful details that you want to get in, but there's just not enough time for them. So I understand that. I think that that's something that every advocate knows, right? That that you have to sometimes just let one of those rich details go. We only have a couple of minutes, and I'm wondering if there's any questions from the audience. And in the meantime, for folks who are interested in sharing their stories, and I guess kind of quickly, because we only have a couple minutes, Amy, what do you say? What do you tell people is the first step? What do you advise folks?
So we've covered a lot. You know, you've got to meaningfully connect. But for me, the first step is take the time to shape your narrative, right? You can't even if you've identified the right person and your plan is to meaningfully connect, if you haven't shaped your narrative, right? Do what I say, not what I did, you know, then define it, right? What do you want to say? Why do you want to say it? You know, like, how are you going to say it? If the goal is to affect change, how can you say it in a way that inspires others, right? What did you learn from it or want them to learn from it? You know, what is the moral of it? Because I love all those adjectives and details, but that will make you actually lose what the narrative was. Right? Because it's the age of soundbite, right? People can't listen to that. So that's my kind of advice.
It's like I said, you know, practice, practice, practice. Tell your dog, tell your cat, tell your neighbor, tell your kids. Everyone should be sick of it by the time you're going to go tell your intended audience. How about you, Jessica? Do you have it? Like, what do you tell people, like, is the first step, like when you're getting them going?
Encontrar tu pasión.
I think you need to find your passion, right? What is it that you want to tell? Now, then you have to think of why you want to tell it and how to tell it. But the first step is find the why. Amy said she found it in her kids. I found it in my kids, but somebody else can find it in somebody else. So you find the why, and this why has to be something that you better be passionate about. Then how to tell it, and who to tell it, and feeling comfortable when you're telling it.
Well, I think that's a great point to wrap up on. We're at time. So I just want to thank our speakers again, Jennifer Aguilar from NC Child. She's a parent advocate, and Amy Dickey, who is a family partner with Parent Voice. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and the things that you've learned along the way. Back to you, Malia.
Yes, thank you all so much, Rose, Amy, and Jessica. I wanted to lift up a couple of comments that are in the chat in case you haven't been able to read them. One is that, you know, just thanking each of you for sharing. And as I listened and heard all three of you spoke to the importance of implementing system of care. And then also Jessica's persistence and always showing up in meetings across the state has helped bring more exposure and respect for North Carolina's Spanish-speaking populations. We are hugely grateful. And a thank you to Rose for your work with NC Health. You often bring stories about important public health issues in North Carolina before it goes to the mainstream media. So thank you, all three of you, for all of your wonderful contributions that you make in creating a system of care and contributing to that system of care, right? Where we're sharing stories, we're encouraging and inspiring others to share their stories. You all are paving the way. So I'm grateful for you. Just wanted to recap a few things from today, things that stood out for me. One is Jessica talking about the importance of inclusivity, right? This is the first time in these institutes that we have had a speaker speaking in Spanish. We have offered the interpretation, but I am thrilled that we were able to do that. And I hope that it is something others will consider doing as well, right? Where we're having people come in to speak with differing, languages, perspectives, etc., and sharing in a way that's most comfortable for you. So thank you, Jessica, for doing that. And Amy, you shared about the deep connection that you felt with Jessica's story, and that you've heard so many stories today, but just hearing Jessica's story, you could relate to that. And that is one of the most powerful parts of storytelling, really making that connection with someone. You're hearing something, it moves us. Also, Rose sharing with us these practical strategies for using stories to change policy, like really giving us your expertise and sharing your knowledge of what you've learned with working with legislators. That is such valuable information. So thank you for sharing that. Also, Dr. Watson, he has signed off, but I just want to acknowledge that he shared his story, really has overcome so much hardship in his life, and that he focused on hope. And he asked us to take a picture of the slide where it said, "Have only positive expectations." And I hope that that's something that we can all leave here with today. And then Felicia, her story on how, and she shared her personal story, and then she talked about how Moms Rising has made story sharing really foundational to the work that they do with legislators, and collecting stories and lifting up the voices of families and parents who often are not at the table when these important policy decisions are made, unfortunately. And Elijah, Elijah is so impressive. He recorded that the video for us because he's in school right now. So Elijah is leading a movement, a youth movement. He is managing a nonprofit that he has started. And all of this while going to school and being a 14-year-old. So he is so impressive, just so incredibly impressive. And I hope that you all will reach out to him. So thank you all for being here today. Thank you for joining us for our third year of doing these Policy Institutes. We've saved a few minutes here at the end, so you will have time to fill out the evaluation. Please fill out the evaluation. It will only take a few minutes. We do use this feedback when we're planning the next year's institutes. I will also be sending you in about 6 months a follow-up survey. We would love to hear how you've used what you've learned in these 2 institutes. If you weren't able to attend the institute last week, it's okay. I'm going to send you the recording so you can go back and watch it. I will also send the recording from today's institute, as well as the presentations and PowerPoints. If you would like to have the presentations from last week's institutes, email me, let me know. I'm happy to share those with you as well. And if you would like to put the link, oh, it's in there. There it is. Thank you, Michelle. So the link is in the chat for the survey. Just take a few moments to take that. We really, really appreciate it. And we also will be putting together an external evaluation report that we'll share with you within the next month or so, reflecting what you all share with us in these. So we do value it. We hope you'll take just a few moments to fill that out. So thank you all for being here today. Thank you to our presenters, and thank you for everyone for all of the support during these institutes.